Hello, Giants fans, and welcome to our emergency. The New York Giants have replaced Brian Daboll as head coach podcast here on the Big Blue View YouTube channel. Ed Valentine here, along with Chris Flum and Nick Filato of Big Blue View. Guys, thank you so much for hopping on. And I have to say this real quick before we get started. Daboll was supposed to speak to media at 1:25. Okay. I'm an old man. I decided I'm going to take a nap at around 20 after 12. I'm going to take a quick nap before we speak to him. And I wake up to the news that he had been fired while I was asleep. So come on, Giants. Can't you ever do anything on the Big Blue View time schedule? But
they just consistently pick the worst possible times. I mean, they traded Odell when I was in the shower.
Or I pick bad times for naps. That I don't know.
Now look, we can blame the Giants.
I don't know. What were you doing when Brian Daboll was fired there, Mr. Filato?
I was
keep it clean now. Keep it clean.
No, I was digging through the all 22 of the defense, which I still need to get to at this point. But yeah, it was I wasn't shocked. I tweeted it right after last game. I was like, I'd be surprised if he's a coach tomorrow. I mean, how many of these catastrophic collapses can ownership, countenance? How many of these can actually happen, right? And it's
four.
Yeah,
no more. Well, it's so funny because I wrote it yesterday, and Tony Del Genio and I did our weekly Monday morning show, and I said, look, the Brian Daboll era is over. And I didn't know for sure if it was going to end today at the bye week or at the end of the season, but we knew, and I think Daboll knew from the sound of his voice last night when he did his post-game presser. I think he knew that it was over as well. But you're right, Nick. There was just no point. It's not going to salvage the season at 2-8. But everybody knew it wasn't going to last after this year. There was just no point in going any farther.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I was still expecting it to be Shane Bowen and then have Daboll get fired on Black Monday. But, well, I guess Black Monday came early. But, yeah, it was very sudden, but not unexpected at all.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you, Ed.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So, I mean, we could sit here and discuss the Brian Daboll era, but moving forward, I look at Mike Kafka right now, and I wanted to ask you, since you're very dialed in with everything going on down there, how much do you believe that this is a real audition for Mike Kafka now that it appears like Joe Schoen will be retained and be heading the coaching search? I don't know the relationship specifically between Joe Schoen and Mike Kafka. It's because I'm not around the building as much as people like you and some of the other beat reporters are. So I wanted to just kind of put that out there as a launching point for this conversation.
Well, that's a very interesting question, Nick. And we all know that Kafka has been highly regarded. I think he's had interviews. I think it's maybe 7 interviews over the last 3 off seasons since he became offensive coordinator for the Giants. And he's a bright, young offensive mind. He's still 38 years old. My question about Mike Kafka, and this is why I think this is a great opportunity for Kafka. He has been so vanilla in his press conferences and his dealings with us. He has been so vanilla that my question has been, can he be the front of an organization? Can he be the face of a franchise? Can he be the guy that leads an organization? Because everybody in the building looks to the head coach, and players look to the head coach, coaches look to that guy, the secretaries can take their cues from how that guy acts around the building. And my question has been, can Mike Kafka step into that role and show the personality and show the leadership and be that guy? What's really interesting is in the couple of opportunities he's had to coach the East-West Shrine Game and at the Senior Bowl, players have talked about the energy that he brings, the passion that he brings, the fire that he brings. And that's not something we have seen in his role as offensive coordinator. So I am very interested to see what he does over the next 7 weeks. If we see a different side of his personality, and I think after we see that, that might be that'll go a long way toward answering that question. I think it's always an uphill battle for an interim guy. I'm thinking about Rich Bisaccia a couple of years ago, I think in Las Vegas, who did a great job and got shown the door anyway. It's an uphill battle, but whether it's with the Giants or not, and I think you wrote this, Chris, I think this is a fantastic opportunity for Mike Kafka to show somebody, whether it's at the NFL or college level, that he can be the lead guy.
Yeah, I agree. This is probably the best possible interview he could have, because he doesn't have to tell anybody how he would run the team, how he would run meetings, go through, construct the game plans, because now he has the opportunity, many opportunities now, to show them how he's going to do it, and we'll get to see the results immediately on the field. And I'm with you, Ed. I want to see what kind of a personality he brings out, and I do want to see what kind of a stamp he puts on the team as a whole, but the offense in particular, because he obviously contributed. He called a lot of plays. He called the plays, but this was Brian Daboll's offense. I think all the quarterback power we've seen over the last several years is testament to that, because we know he loved to run Josh Allen and basically have Allen be the power back for the Bills offense. And that continued. I want to see if that changes, how that changes. I want to see if we see some Andy Reid type things coming out of this offense now that it's really Kafka's baby.
Nick, thoughts?
Absolutely. Yeah, my thoughts on that is I'm right there with you. I want to see what type of adjustments and what exactly, like, how does this offense change? I don't expect too much to defense, and I think a lot of the changes that are going to happen, they won't be. It's not going to be readily privy to the audience, to all of us, because it's going to be behind closed doors, how meetings are run, all that kind of stuff. But what's going on when we can discern the differences? And a lot of that just depends on the offense itself. Like how much influence did Brian Daboll have over this offense? Obviously a lot, but now that Daboll is not there, what will Mike Kafka change up from a play calling, a sequencing, and just an overall philosophical standpoint when it comes to calling plays on Sunday? Now, he's going to have a big burn on him. You got Mike Groh doing his thing. I'm excited to see these little changes. I do hope it sparks the New York Giants. We don't know if Jackson Dart is going to be playing next week. That's obviously massive. I wonder if Jameis Winston is going to be promoted to quarterback 2 after the debacle that was Russell Wilson on Sunday. I think with the changes of your head coach, I think all of those doors are now opened for change that can lead to a more competitive and possibly a more competent product. And one of the main ones is the one I just mentioned, especially with Jackson Dart being possibly injured and missing next game because he's in the concussion protocol.
Yeah, one of the things that I think people need to understand here is, look, we're heading to week 11. All right. Mike Kafka cannot blow up the roster. Look, if he doesn't want Deonte Banks to see the field, Deonte Banks isn't going to see the field. If he wants Evan Neal to play, Evan Neal's going to get a chance to play. Okay. But these are, in the grand scheme of things, these are relatively small changes. Maybe they should have been made. Maybe they shouldn't have been made. We don't know exactly why, a guy like Neal or a guy like Jalen Hyatt has been basically banished to Siberia by the Giants coaching staff. We just don't know. But the on-field changes, schematic changes, even those will be small because it is week 11. This is not OTAs where they can go back and reinstall an entire playbook. You just can't do that. So we'll see. what I'm anxious to see the personality, as I said, that Kafka brings. Nick, you're having all kinds of, you're moving all around here. What are you doing to my live stream? You're just, I don't know, man.
I
What are
got
you doing?
multiple computers working right now. I'm balancing things. I'm editing. I'm uploading other stuff to my other YouTube channel. There's a lot going on at the moment, but I am listening because I can multitask.
Man, I was just about to say, man, you know, your girlfriend can multitask, Nick. I'm not sure about you.
I don't got no girlfriend. So.
Sorry about that. But listen, man, you know, let's get back to this. Like I said, I'm interested in Kafka, the personality. I'm interested to see the public face that he presents. I'm interested to see one of the big things that has been talked about so much with Brian Daboll has been accountability for players. And that doesn't necessarily mean standing out in front of the media and trash talking a player. What that means, for example, is going back to last year when Malik Neighbors, I think it was after one of the Philly games, where I think Daniel Jones threw for less than 100 yards and the Giants got blown out. And Malik Neighbors was asked what happened to the offense and why he didn't get the ball more, because I think he only caught 4 passes in that game. And he went to the media and he said, I don't know what happened. I was open. Okay. Which is 100% throwing your quarterback under the bus. It absolutely is throwing your quarterback under the bus. And what you do as a head coach, you might agree. But what you do as a head coach is say, we win as a team, we lose as a team. I've spoken to Malik, because that's not the message that we want to give. You know, we don't want to say anything publicly that even remotely sounds like we're throwing our teammates under the bus. Instead, the head coach said he was open. You know, and that's 100% not holding your players accountable for being responsible to each other. And if a situation like that happens again, if a situation comes up like Dexter Lawrence saying after the Giants give up 105 points in 3 games, says, I think I'm playing well. You know, how does the head coach deal with that? Because that, again, as much as I love Dex, is not being accountable. So, and it's a tough spot for an interim head coach, but you have to make an effort. So I'm interested to see that.
Yeah, I'm also interested to see if there's kind of I suppose a philosophic shift is the best way I could put it. Just over the last few weeks, I've noticed the Giants more or less playing to not lose games as opposed to playing to win them. And I think some of the decisions they've made, like maybe keeping Evan Neal on the bench until they were absolutely forced. Their hand was forced by injury. Instead of just, even trying him as a 6th lineman to see what would happen with him out there. Yeah, I think they've taken the safest route they can at every opportunity. And I think it's because Daboll in particular was afraid of something like this happening. So he'd rather try to avoid mistakes than be aggressive. We saw that was my problem with the 4th down field goal, go for the touchdown decision. I personally wanted to see them be aggressive and pursue the touchdown as opposed to just take the points and move on. And I think we saw the defense play that way against Dallas, against Denver. And that's something that has just kind of stuck with me throughout the year. That and just the complete lack of attention to detail, which I think is also an accountability thing.
Yeah, and it's the team is undisciplined. They play undisciplined. They commit just atrocious and egregious penalties at the most inopportune times. And to your point too, Chris, I want to see the Giants dictate in these situations. They take these leads, and then you're right. They go into a shell and they play conservative. And I get it from a football standpoint. Yeah, you want the 2-possession lead in the fourth quarter. Your defense isn't playing terrible up until that point. I understand that, but it's a half yard. And if you don't get it, then you have Caleb Williams on an offense pinned deep into their territory. And then possibly your defense can come up with another stop and you can get the football back. But if you get it, you go up a touchdown and you go up with another touchdown and you're inspiring. You're inspiring your team. You're putting the trust in your team. You're 2-7 at this point, right? Like you're 2-7. Try to inspire, try to dictate, try to like finally use the cleaver to cut the head off of your opponent instead of allowing them to breathe and then mount a comeback. And that just seems to be like what the Giants have done in a lot of these collapses is they play a little bit tentative and the team crawls back in. And then that disease of the mind seems to set in with the team where it's like, oh, well, we just gave up a third down. Oh, we're going to capitulate. And we're going to allow this team to drive down the field and score. And that's what's happened all this. Like when I was watching the game yesterday, guys, I was the Giants aren't winning this football game. When they kicked that field goal, I'm like, Bears are coming back and they're going to win this football game. And it's exactly what happened.
As soon as Jackson Dart fumbled the ball, I think you knew the Giants weren't winning the football game. That's when I knew. Mm-hmm. That's when I knew. As soon as Jackson Dart fumbled the ball, because we've all seen it. We all know. But as soon as Jackson Dart fumbled the ball, we're like, oh, there we go. But what I will say is, Chris and I have had the discussion about the field goal, non-field goal, about going for it. And I think there's two sides to it. I don't think there's a right answer or a wrong answer. What I do think is that whether it's 14 points or 10 points, you've got a 2-score lead in that game with 6 minutes to go when Chicago gets the ball at their own 9-yard line. You've got to win that game. Doesn't matter if it's 10 or 14. You've got to win that game. But I do think, as Nick said, it's a disease of the mind. And what that tells you, or what it tells me, is that players may think that they're playing hard. They may think that they're bought in. But a lot of what that tells me is that they are not buying what the coaching staff is selling. Mm-hmm. They are not all in as a group, and they're just not buying what the coaching staff is selling. And the only other thing I wanted to say is, going back to this idea of not playing to win, that is largely what I thought Joe Judge did at the end of his tenure. What I thought Joe Judge did week after week after week was play not to win games because he didn't believe in his roster. He played to try to keep the score as respectable as he could in an effort not to get fired. The first time that I thought Brian Daboll did that this year was last week against the 49ers when you're behind 20-7 and you have a 4th down, and I don't remember what the yardage was, but you're behind 20-7 in the middle of the third quarter, and you kick a field goal that makes it 20-10 instead of going for a first down and trying to go in and score a touchdown. That was the first time I thought Daboll did that. But and I thought about Joe Judge right away. So I get it. I also think that a lot of the way that Daboll has been using Jackson Dart has not been about Jackson Dart. It's been about self-preservation, or an effort at self-preservation of his own. So anyway, I think I've talked long enough. If somebody else wants to jump in there.
On the Jackson Dart point, Chris, I want to get your input on this. Yeah. I completely agree when we're looking at the end of that last Eagles game. Like, that was inexcusable. You rush him twice. You're down big. You're just trying to make this a more respectable game. When it comes to how he was used yesterday, not as much, because those were like the most successful rushing attack the Giants employed was Jackson Dart outside the tackle, bash and counter with the fake toss that led to the first touchdown, bash on the second touchdown. Play got hurt. That was bash. Bash means back away. So the back runs away from the 2 pulling blockers. You create 2 more gaps for the defense to account for as the linebackers are flowing with the running back. So you're gaining a leverage advantage. And Jackson Dart, he's a running quarterback, and it was still a competitive game. And sometimes, injuries do happen, but like those plays, I'm not going to necessarily hold against Brian Daboll or Mike Kafka, who's calling the plays, but it's those situations where you're down big and you're running him on the goal line when it's irrelevant. Those are the ones that I believe were self-preservation mode. But when it came to the Chicago game, it seemed like, yeah, he got hurt. That sucks. It's a physical game though. And that's going to happen.
Yeah. That's how I tend to come down on it. Dart's legs they're an incredible weapon, because like Daniel Jones could run, but he didn't have the situational awareness and just that quick twitch that Dart had. It was one of the runs he had shortly before the fumble where he just broke that linebacker or DB's ankles, just juked him right out of his cleats. And that's something you don't see all that often, especially from a quarterback who's built like Dart. Yeah, he's not Kyler Murray.
Exactly. Not to cut you off either, but to your point, the 25-yard touchdown run by Jackson Dart, like that was an exceptional run. Like Jackson Dart understands how to set blocks up. Like he is a nuanced rusher. He's a very smart when it comes to his spatial awareness, because Jaquan Brisker was getting blocked by, I think it was Wan'Dale Robinson. And you could see Jackson Dart, he steps with that inside foot, gets Jaquan Brisker to put his hips inside. And then that gave the leverage to a much smaller Wan'Dale Robinson just to get in the way, to allow Jackson Dart to then juke back outside the numbers where there was no one, because Brisker lost contain. And all of that was set up by Dart's rushing ability. Like that is very impressive little subtleties that he possesses when it comes to running the football. And then you look at what he does with his arm. And that's something that I think is, it's even more advanced than what we expected in his rookie season. But yeah, no, he's to your point, exceptional runner of the football. It's a big part of his game. It's a big reason why the offense has looked as competent as it has had over the last 6 weeks or so.
Yeah. But also to Ed's point, the Giants do need, and I think now that Mike Kafka probably isn't in self-preservation mode so much as, win himself a job mode. I don't think the Giants will use Dart quite as recklessly as they have. And I also do wonder if maybe some of the Andy Reid influence, that, kind of classic West Coast influence that Kafka grew up in, will show itself a little bit more in, if not they're not going to build a whole new offense, but if the design of the game plan and the plays that are called within that game plan, create some more opportunities that kind of protect Dart, so they're not forced to run him into the ground and make him their running game.
Yeah, and I do think, guys, we talked a little bit about personnel. I do think it will be interesting to see if some of the personnel is used a little bit differently, if some of the quote unquote buried guys, get a little bit of run. If some of the guys that we've kind of been shaking our head about, why is this guy playing? If some of that changes, we shall see. But I do also want to ask you, there's in the comments here, there's a couple of comments about what will happen this week against the Green Bay Packers. And by the way, I do happen to think very, very much so. I know that how much John Merrick cares about what the fans have to say, and about the atmosphere in the stadium. I do happen to think that the Giants having a home game this coming Sunday is a big part of why Brian Daboll doesn't have a job today. That stadium, it may still be 2/3 Packers fans. Okay. But you just circumvented all the airplanes flying over the stadium, begging you for changes. You circumvented a lot of the ugliness. I just want to ask you two guys, if Jackson Dart can't play on Sunday, who's your quarterback?
For me, it's Jameis Winston.
Yeah, myself as well.
And that's easy for me personally, because we've watched Russell Wilson enter the game several times. Every single time the offense turns into a pumpkin. It just doesn't do anything. It is stagnant. If there's energy around this offense when Dart's in there, when Russell Wilson's in there, this offense is a corpse, bro. So like
Mhm.
I find it very difficult to excuse, and I'm not trying to kick Russell Wilson while he's down, but at this point it's done. Like, and you brought in another quarterback for this very same reason. You have to turn to Jameis Winston. It would be an indictment if you don't, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I do wonder if that was more of the don't play to lose aspect of it. Russ is, he's got the resume. He is a much, much safer player than Jameis YOLO Winston. But the thing that really struck me when Russ came in was how indecisive he looked behind the line of scrimmage. How many times he would hitch and, go to throw, but pull it down. And he just didn't look comfortable. He didn't look like he had a clue where he was going to go with the football. And okay, yeah, no Malik Neighbors, no Cam Scatterboo, but it's not like he hasn't practiced with these guys. It's not like he hasn't been in the meeting room since the start. It just looked painful out there watching him try to execute the offense. And man, I have to at least see what Jameis can do. Sure, he might have a 3 interception game, but he might also have a 3 touchdown game at the same time.
And the other part of it is, if Dart's not there, if Scatterboo isn't there, even to an extent, Neighbors, where does the energy come from? All right. And Jameis Winston, if nothing else, just go back and look at some of the pregame clips from last year when he was in Cleveland. If nothing else, Jameis Winston brings energy and excitement. And as Tony and I said this morning, if you're a wide receiver, you have to pay attention, because you're either going to have to catch the ball, or you're going to have to knock it away from the defensive back. You're going to have to make some kind of a play.
So Gunnar Olszewski is the Giants' new number 1 receiver. Got it.
Gunnar, the Giants are going, if Jameis is playing, you guys may or may not remember that Gunnar Olszewski was a Division II defensive back as a college player. The Giants are going to need to clone Gunnar Olszewski. All right. They're going to have to, they're going to need guys to be ready to do that. So, but yeah, I agree with you guys wholeheartedly that it's got to be Jameis if Dart can't go. And I'll be honest with you, I am never, ever one who, look, you guys watch baseball a little bit too.
Yep.
How is it that a baseball player gets a concussion and he misses half the season? Okay. And a football player gets a concussion and on a Sunday, and he passes the protocol on Friday and he plays again on Sunday in a much more violent sport. How is that? So I have no problem, even if he technically could pass the concussion protocol, I have no problem if Jackson Dart sits for a week.
Neither do I. At this point, I'd love to see Jackson Dart. I hope he gets those reps, but you do got to preserve the young man's health. And again, I am interested to see Jameis Winston out there and allow him to at least get a game under his belt after he signed a contract where he thought he was going to compete for a starting position, and the Giants went and added Russell Wilson 2 days later and then drafted a quarterback in the first round.
Yeah, that at the very least it would be entertaining.
Yeah,
and if Dart is able to pass the concussion protocol, which who knows, I'm not sure I would want him out there with Micah Parsons coming and hunting. The Packers haven't played up to, I think, what we all expected them to be, but I'm also not exactly sure how much I trust the Giants offensive line at this point. They've, up until this Bears game, they had played really well. But part of that is Jackson Dart doing what he does, scrambling, slowing the defense down, because they couldn't, if they lost contain, he was gone. If he's not doing that as much, and maybe Illuminor's still kind of feeling that pec injury. That's a tough injury for a lineman right there. When you have to bench press a 300-pound dude 60 times a game. I'm not sure I want Mike out there. I'm not sure I want Dart out there with Parsons out there.
No, I feel you, man. I
Yeah.
feel you. That would be tough. That'd be tough. But yeah, Ed, I gotta get bouncing. So just want to say thank you guys for letting me join this.
Hey.
And
All right, thanks
thank you.
for very entertainingly,
Yes.
moving around the screen. And
I was making everybody dizzy in the comments. I'm keeping everybody on their toes. There's some of the
Yes.
Giants, they're not on their toes that much, these Giants, right? They got to get
Yeah.
kept on the toes. I got to keep the fans on the toes because the Giants are not doing it for them.
all right, thanks for hopping on, Nick.
Absolutely, guys. Take care.
All right. So, hey, Chris,
Yeah.
just a couple more things.
Did something happen while we were talking?
No, but
That's a surprise.
just Joe Schoen. Obviously, we saw the press release. Fans have been asked forever and ever if Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll were a package deal. Okay, Joe Schoen hired Brian Daboll, and I have been saying that John Mara has said for a year that he can separate the two jobs. John Mara, Steve Tisch proved that 100% today. They not only kept Joe Schoen, they said that Joe Schoen will lead the search for a new head coach, which means that despite the fact that Joe has not been perfect, the Giants are looking at the fact that they're 2-8 and blaming the head coach for this not being a 5-5 or 6-4 football team, and that Joe Schoen is staying put. Joe Schoen's not getting fired at the end of the year. That you agree with me? I think that's the only way you can take that.
Yeah, that is what I immediately thought when I saw that. Like, Schoen will, at the very least, finish out his 5-year contract. And I honestly think that's the correct move. When we were talking about this last night, my take on it is Schoen has actually built a pretty good roster. The Giants had to be good enough to get that big lead over the Denver Broncos with their defense. They had to be good enough to take out an undefeated Chargers team. They had to be good enough to beat the Eagles on Thursday Night Football. You can't have a defensive collapse. You can't lose a double-digit lead if you don't establish that to start with. And that the roster that Joe Schoen built is good enough to do that. I'll just say it, they've got a franchise quarterback in Jackson Dart. They've got a franchise left tackle in Andrew Thomas. They've got a defensive player of the year candidate in Brian Burns. They've got a franchise receiver in Malik Neighbors. They've got good young talent at tight end. They've got good young talent at, people might disagree with me, but in the secondary at cornerback and safety. Assuming Micah McFadden is retained, that's going to be an interesting thing to follow. Yeah, they've got a player who coming off a breakout year at linebacker. They've got good young talent at running back. Like, the roster has enough young players on it to be good young players to be competitive and compete against the best in the NFL. But they haven't been. And a lot of it has been because of missed assignments, mistakes, Okereke taking Wan'Dale Robinson out and then Wan'Dale Robinson taking somebody else out, or
Cordell Flott yesterday.
Cordell Flott,
Demetrius Flanagan Foles out yesterday.
Yes. Yeah, like those sorts of things happening. Like that, to me, that comes down to the coaching. And once Brian Daboll didn't fire Shane Bowen after the Denver collapse, all of that on both sides of the ball comes down on him. And so that's kind of just where I am. And I think Joe Schoen's biggest mistake was hiring Brian Daboll in the first place. And it seems like the work he has done building the roster outweighs that mistake.
It's interesting because I think we can all agree that 2022 was fantastic. It was fun. It was, it was great to see the Giants make the playoffs, win a playoff game. It had been since the Super Bowl in 2011 that they had actually won a playoff game. Yep. That was fantastic, but in a way it set the franchise back because I think that the Giants got a little bit fooled by where they were. What I was going to say is I think we can all agree that maybe partially because of 2022, it's taken longer for the Giants to begin to make strides with that roster. But that is happening now. And if you agree that the Giants should have won those 4 football games that they had 10-point leads or more in, if you agree that they should have won those games, then you're agreeing that they should be at the very least a 6-4 football team, that they have the ability to be that. And you don't fire a general manager who's putting together a roster that can win 6 of 10 games. You just don't do that. So it's taken longer than it should have, but I think Joe has things pointed in the right direction roster-wise. And when you fire a general manager, you are blowing up the entire organization because you're blowing up the front office, you're blowing up the coaching staff, you're blowing up the scouting department, you're blowing up everything about how the organization does business. And if you can avoid that, I think you want to avoid that.
Yeah, completely. 2022 is, as unexpected, amazing, fun, chaotic, whatever words you want to use to describe it. What a ride it was. It really was in a lot of ways a Pyrrhic victory. And yeah, I think you're right. It did set them back because in 2023, they tried to short circuit the rebuilding process. They brought in Darren Waller, Paris Campbell. They did a lot of Gettleman moves to try to catch that lightning in a bottle instead of doing things the right way and following through with the plan and going through the process of, okay, they cleaned up the mess. Now they had to pour the foundation and build the structure the right way. They just went for the quick fix and the fad diets to try to get to where they were. And it obviously didn't work this past year. And to a lesser extent, the 2024 offseason, or maybe similar extent, they really did follow a defined plan. And I think the fact that the roster is in a pretty good spot, coaching aside, poor play aside, I think that does speak to that plan. And I think that is why Joe Schoen is safe for now.
Right. Yeah, the roster is better than it's playing. The roster is not perfect. The roster is not complete. There are holes in it. Mistakes have been made. We will grant you that. No general manager, Jerry Reese used to say that no general manager has ever batted 1,000. Okay. Nope. It just doesn't happen. And when you miss on the number 7 overall pick, when you miss on the number 7 overall pick, look, if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, this is why the Philadelphia Eagles could take the Jalen Carter gamble a couple of years ago. There were a lot of there's a lot of baggage with Jalen Carter. There were a lot of things about Carter that made people stay away from him. But the Philadelphia Eagles could absorb that if Jalen Carter turned out to be a bust, if he turned out to be a bad guy, if he turned out to be somebody after 2 years that they just wanted to get away from. They could absorb that because their roster was already built. They were going to be a very good team regardless of what Jalen Carter turned out to be. The Giants missing on a number 7 overall pick, which they did with Evan Neal. What have the Giants had to do because they've missed on that pick? They are still fixing that pick, not to mention that they seem to have missed on Josh Azudu, but who maybe the coaching staff never handled the right way to begin with. But you went out and spent money on Jermaine Illuminor. You went out and spent a boatload of money on John Runyon. You signed because Josh Azudu isn't what you thought he was going to be, or because you were trying to use him at tackle when he should have been a guard, you had to go out and sign a placeholder in Greg Van Roten. You've had to spend a draft pick on Marcus Bowe. 3 years later, 4 years later, you're still chasing fixing a mistake. And that's what happens when you are a bad team trying to get better, trying to rise up. That mistake costs you years of trying to fix it.
Yes, and that was built on previous mistakes with, passing on Rashawn Slater for the trade down for Kadarius Toney. And it's those not having that defined plan makes those mistakes more likely, and it makes them hurt just that much more. So hopefully it at least seems like the Giants have, like you said, they're pointed in the right direction. They have a plan, they have a vision going forward. Now that it really need to see them get the head coach right.
Right.
And that's really the next order of business.
Absolutely it is. And let's just finish the show. I've done a post talking with Gary Myers, longtime NFL columnist. I did a post on Bill Belichick. I did a list of potential candidates. I'll probably do another one with some other guys that weren't on that list, because I know there are guys I left off that list. To put a bow on it, let's just do it this way. If there was one guy out there that you could have, as Giants coach next year, who would it be?
Okay, I'm going to assume John Harbaugh isn't getting fired by the Ravens, because they seem to have remembered that the fact that they're the Baltimore Ravens, and Lamar Jackson getting healthy helps with that. This is difficult, and I also want to see how Mike Kafka handles the remainder of the season, because who knows, he might be the guy. That would be wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I might actually have to lean towards Brian Flores. He was my front runner back when the Giants hired Brian Daboll. I am actually hesitant to go for a defensive-minded head coach, simply because you need to nail the offensive coordinator, because right now the offense is the reason why teams win consistently. It's just much more stable from year to year because of quarterback play and developing Dart and making sure he stays in the best possible environment to grow and thrive. That is the most important thing for the Giants going forward. But I do think, assuming Brian Flores has learned from what happened in Miami and how that went down, I think he has enough of the right qualities that I would want to see from a Giants head coach. Like, Lane Kiffin is very interesting. I'm not sure how he would deal with New York, the New York press, or how they would deal with him. He can be crazy. And I really, nostalgia aside, I don't want to see Belichick come to New York. Like, there's so much baggage there now that feels like just a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You mentioned Brian Flores, and look, the lawsuit is still out there. The history between Flores and Tua Tagovailoa has to be an issue that you have to examine, because you have to believe that Brian Flores, and he has said that he understands that, that he did things incorrectly with Tua. You have to believe that he means that. You have to believe that he's changed, that he understands he has to be better with people, and that he can be better with people. You have to believe that. As I said, the lawsuit kind of has to go away. I do firmly believe this. Okay, and I will put this out. Into the stratosphere. In an alternate universe where, everybody believes that, in the end, John Mara and Steve Tisch make the final decisions. but when the Giants hired Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, this was at the height of all the nepotism charges and all of that with Brian Daboll, with John Mara, with Chris Mara, with Tim McDonald, with the whole family stuff and all that. I firmly believe that the guy that John Mara had at the very top of his list was Brian Flores. I firmly believe that. I think Brian Flores would have been the leader in the clubhouse for that job if John Mara had not sort of stepped back and said, I hired this GM. I need to let this GM do what he thinks is right. So whether with all that water under the bridge, Flores could still be Giants coach, I don't know. John Harbaugh, as you said, would be for me. If the Ravens, if every relationship at some point runs its course, Belichick and the Patriots did.
Yeah.
No matter how the season plays out in Baltimore, if the two sides decide that relationship has played its way out, run its course, if John Harbaugh wants to come to New Jersey, then you write him a blank check.
Write him a blank check. I would personally drive to Baltimore, pick him up, and then deliver him right to the Giants facilities, stopping wherever he wanted to stop on the way there.
And I've seen a couple of mentions of John Gruden in the comments, and just let me be as forceful as I can in stating this. Understanding the baggage that comes with John Gruden, understanding who John Mara is, there is probably less than a 0% chance that John Mara would ever sign off on John Gruden being the head coach. And I will say one thing farther. I actually looked this up the other day. John Gruden won a Super Bowl 23 years ago. The various teams that John Gruden has coached since winning that Super Bowl, the vast majority of those teams have been bad. John Gruden is still making a living off of something he did 23 years ago, and he has done nothing since then to justify all of this love and all of this frothing at the mouth of John Gruden's got to be the next head coach.
Yeah. And I will say my dark horse is, and the reason I didn't include him is because, like Harbaugh, he's not available, but Stefanski, the Cleveland Browns.
100%. That's where I was going to go. That is my guy.
Yes.
I'll let you finish, but what I want to say is this. His record of success in Cleveland is mixed, but that guy is a really good coach.
Yes.
He's in a really, really awful situation with Deshaun Watson still being paid big money and with a terrible ownership in Cleveland. That guy is a really good head coach, and I still wish Pat Shurmur tried to bring Stefanski to New York as his offensive coordinator, and the Vikings would not let Stefanski get away. But that is my guy if the Cleveland Browns let him go.
Yeah. Like I said, I think if he becomes available, he immediately becomes my top pick. Like I said, the Harbaugh right now, that doesn't seem like it's going to happen. The Browns just lost to a Jets team that I don't think has thrown for 100 yards total in the last 4 weeks combined. They lost to a Jets team that just traded 2 of their 4 best players away. Even with ownership taking ownership for the Deshaun Watson debacle, that looks like it could be coming to a conclusion.
Yeah, for me, he is a much better coach than the situation in Cleveland is allowing him to show. And in the right circumstance, like I said, if John Harbaugh was available, you go there. in the right circumstance, I give Kevin Stefanski a chance with the Giants in a heartbeat.
Yeah. I would love to see him become a Kyle Shanahan or a Sean McVay with the Giants, with Dart, with Neighbors, with all of those pieces. But he has to become available.
Absolutely, Chris. I think that's probably a good place for.
We've talked long enough.
Yeah, because I could say a lot more about John Gruden, but I don't want to go there. All right, I just don't want to go there. I think this is a good place for us to call it a day. Appreciate you hopping on, and
absolutely.
And Giants fans, thank you as always for watching. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.